This is Motivation. I'm Lori Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Chrissy Van. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode. Today's episode's called Riding Uphill. Riding a motorcycle uphill takes extra effort with the resistance of gravity working against you. We need to apply more gas to the old throttle, rev that engine a little higher to get where we want to go. Well, that same extra effort and hustle, it comes into play for so many women, transgender, non-binary people when we're breaking through the resistance of long-held biases and barriers in male-dominated pockets of the world. Progress is happening, but we still have a long way to go. So today on the podcast, we're addressing that uphill battle with a very, very dope guest, friend, Richelle Trelenberg from True Grit Moto. We're talking life skills required to break through those perceived barriers, learn how to deal with the unforeseen obstacles of resistance from those around you and within yourself. And as always, we'll leave you with your motivation maintenance, a tool you can apply to your life today to propel you forward. This is today's motivation. And then hit it, Chrissy.
Okay, so 2018, there was a survey done by the Motorcycle Industry Council that found that 19% of motorcycles are owned by women. Now, that's almost double from a decade prior. So pretty impressive statistic. Charging forward in a couple of years, women will make up 1/4 of the motorcycle riding populace. So this is pretty damn exciting. We are coming out and we were coming strong out on the roads. However, there is another stat that when I was doing research for this podcast, Lori, it shocked me. The Bureau of Labor Statistics found that when it comes to auto mechanics, this is across all types. For auto mechanics, women make up just 2.1%. 2.1. Talk about a male-dominated field. So this segues perfectly into our very first guest on the Motivation podcast. Richelle, we are so excited to have you. Richelle, of course, is of True Grit Motorcycle Mechanics in Vancouver. If you are local, hit her up because she is incredible. But I have to know, 2.1%, Richelle, did you know that you were such a rarity out there?
I guess the answer would probably be, yeah, you can feel it for sure. I didn't realize the statistics were 2%, but yeah.
When you say you can feel it, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean by you can feel it?
When you walk into an environment and there's no other females there, and no matter where I was, no matter how long it's been, since the beginning of me getting my very first bicycle, all the way up to getting a car, to getting a motorcycle, when I walk into a mechanic shop or I have questions, there was never a female there.
Have you, to date, have you ever worked alongside a female in this environment of working in bike mechanics? Have you ever actually or spoke to another woman that works in this field?
No, not until this year alone.
Whoa.
Wow.
That actually astounds me. So for people that don't, that actually legitimately shocks me. That's insane. I mean, the statistic, it makes sense. But when you hear that, I couldn't imagine working in my field and having no representation along the journey. You're literally paving that path. My mind is blown. So the fact that it was just this year, maybe fill people in. How long have you been a motorcycle mechanic? And give us a glimpse to how you got into this journey, especially knowing there wasn't the representation ahead of you.
So 2018, I decided I wanted to kind of kick what I was doing. At that time, I was working for a company called Staff Management, and we did temporary hiring for Amazon, which was huge. And so there was lots of movement there, and I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go, and motorcycles were my passion, obviously. So I jumped into school at BCIT. I just Googled it and I stumbled upon it, and it turned out that the instructor was a female. And that blew my mind and actually made me feel so much more comfortable. I mean, how could you not? You're expecting to go there, email, and it's going to be a male. It's the first thing you think.
Absolutely.
And and it ended up being a female. Her name was Marcy. And I joined in on that class, kind of just jumping into the wind, hoping that it would be something great. I was obviously, when you kind of get to that point in your life and you're like, I think I'm going to start following my dreams.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And you're not, yes. And you're not sure if that is going to be the, am I going to make it? Is this going to be good? I didn't even think, am I going to be the only female? I didn't even think about it. And on top of that, I'm queer, and I mean, I don't know how else to explain it, but I'm 100% cross-dressing all day long. You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm doing it so well.
Thank you.
Hell yes.
And it feels good. I'll live my life. And so I jumped into that program, and the class was all male. And the only other person that was not a cis male was somebody that was trans, and they didn't identify as trans until probably about 3 weeks into the class. They approached me, and they kind of filled me in. And they had obviously been struggling the years prior trying to get into this same program, but didn't have the same. If I can go back a hot second, my personality allows me to make connections with people that if I looked like myself and was trying to be myself, but didn't have the personality that I have, it might be a lot harder. But I've been super lucky and raised in a way that I have to really just not give a shit, but also respect and love everything around me. So this person was struggling, and so that was the only other person that was in the program that was different from, a male figure that, was straight or just male in general. And then coming out of that, I had no idea where I wanted to go, but I knew I couldn't make $16 an hour, which is what you make when you start up. And I'll talk about it in more of this podcast, but starting out as a female, I've witnessed personally recently that you don't make nearly as much as a male starting in the same industry.
What would be the difference? What is the difference around?
So I guess
experienced
without like putting any shops or names to it.
Yeah.
The truth of a real example is that I know of a male technician that started at $18 an hour, and somebody that was female that had the exact same credentials was dropped and started at 16 an hour.
Brutal. How does that make you feel when you learn that now, knowing it's 2021?
Yeah, I know. What a trip. It's frustrating. And I think it's frustrating because I don't know if that person felt that they weren't due that, because it's a bit of a struggle as a female or maybe, even as males, I guess sometimes you're like, can I really do this? Is my opinion worth it? Am I worth $18 an hour? And how do you know? I feel like we've been told for so long who we are, and what we're worth, that we all think, okay, as a general sense, okay, I'm the $16 an hour girl because I have a lot to learn. And the male goes in and says, I'm the $18 an hour guy because I already know it all. And so me personally, I feel frustrated at it because, and a whole reason I started True Grit, I know I have such a strong female presence in this, but it's for everybody. And I just want people like that to know, listen, you are $18 an hour. And, I guess that's getting a little bit deep on it, but
no, but it should. It's like that's something that needs to be addressed in such a tremendous way across all fields. Like we know as women, I don't have the exact stat offhand, but it's something outrageous on every dollar, what we're taking home. And at the end of the day, I find it so fascinating because some industries, it's subjective, like your skill set is subjective. Whereas you look at when you're dealing with a mechanic, there is a proof of your worth in everything that you do with your body, with your hands, with your mind, with your knowledge. And the proof is in the product that you're delivering to these people. So I find it disgustingly outrageous that there wouldn't be equality, but it sadly is not surprising at the same time. One thing before we go too far that I'm really curious about, going back to your time at BCIT, I didn't catch if it was Darcy or Marcy, but knowing that there was that Marcy, female-led instructor, what does Marcy mean to you? Because I can imagine your initial reaction when you learned it was female and you had that feeling. What was that like for you to at least see someone that was representing the female populace?
I think this is a really key question, actually, Chrissy, because I've worked with females that step on other females, and that's the unfortunate part of them trying to, and, often it's not them trying to fight you. It's them just trying to struggle to keep their place. And sometimes they feel threatened. And with Marcy, she didn't even care that I was female, in my opinion. I felt equal. That's what I felt.
Yes.
And it wasn't like the recognition of being, okay, female this. She didn't even, there was no comment or notice or anything like that. There was no second glance. There was no take me aside if you need extra time. I think Marcy, however, did see something in me, and she helped me with other things, like I had a hard time testing and certain things that I had a hard time and I would question it. But I think she would have done the same thing for anybody else. Gender would have never mattered. So on my level of comfort and feeling supported, I think Marcy did a great job because everybody was one. And then on the other side of it, it was the first day I was like, okay, she is female. I feel like I can do something. And it was just that one day of seeing her face being like, great. Okay, cool. I'm going to do this. I can do this. Right.
Oh, I love that so much.
Why representation matters so much. Because so often we have this belief system that we don't belong somewhere because nobody that looks like us or nobody that we can identify with is in that role. And it matters so tremendously. Like, do you feel as though if you ever knew a woman mechanic or you had representation when you were, say, a teenager or 20 years old or so forth, do you think you might have come to this conclusion? This was maybe a purposeful path for yourself? Do you think that would have come earlier if you would have had more of representation at all?
Would I have jumped on this path sooner?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I know because my real father, he built bikes. My godfather builds bikes. And the sad reality is the only woman I ever saw in a shop was the pornographic photos in the shop.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yep.
So there was Playboys on the wall. There was all these things. That being said, my dad and my godfather, they are, my father, he's passed on, but I'm sure he would be super excited as to what I am doing now. And my godfather, bless his heart, is constantly supporting me on this journey. And I don't think that they either realized that I could have done this sooner as well. Not that they wouldn't have supported me. I just don't think they thought that's an option. But
yeah. Or even the barriers that projecting women in that capacity, and that being the representation is women being sexualized, being the, that being what you saw in that regard. I don't think even the men that are in the best interest and they mean well, how much they expose us to women only coming in one kind of box when it comes to motorcycles. That's hypersexualized.
I want to jump on that with a question to Richelle, because exactly knowing that is the common stereotype. And even as riders, let's face it, we see it all the time in the way sometimes we're represented by other individuals. But do you come into obstacles then as a female mechanic with male patrons that want to have work done on their bikes? Like, have they ever almost looked at you in a level of that demeaning fashion because of gender?
Yeah. here's the cool thing. I think had I done this 10 years ago, it would have been a lot worse. Now, if I can lay it down to a number of people, I've probably only had about 3 people in my interaction where they've completely ignored me or had started a conversation thinking that nobody else was there. And then as soon as a male walks in, just turn their head and start talking directly to them as if they had never even spoken a word to me. And it's happened maybe 3 times out of the hundreds of people that I speak to in a day. Nowadays, I'm noticing a huge open and welcoming, relaxing space for people to just talk to me about it and see where my opinion goes. And it doesn't matter gender or not, or maybe they're just really good at hiding it. But I haven't felt too bad about it yet. And in fact, I think a lot of males are secretly coming to me.
Hell
which is
yes,
super
because you
funny.
have an incredible
amazing.
reputation in our community. So
Yeah.
I'm like not surprised. Your reputation definitely is well in front of you. It makes me happy to know, because I do think, and Lori and I were talking about this just before we came on the podcast, how I'm so excited about the generations even behind mine, because I think the conversations are happening. I think social media has actually helped tremendously with that, where you have the ability to learn about people's different lifestyles, different cultures, different hobbies, and it's opened up our minds to this. And I think the majority of people do come from a compassionate, loving way. I will say, though, that 3 people is still 3 too many. Still not okay.
It definitely didn't feel very good.
I have that happen too. Like, as a consumer, the amount of times if I walk into a motorcycle shop with my husband, I would say 99.5% of the time, I don't get acknowledged. And I'm the one that's shopping. And actually, I did pull up the statistic. Females are going to be the ones, already we're trending, that we spend more on mods at the end of the day, more on our apparel, and more on, I think it was parts and service as well. So I'm like, they should be the ones that are talking to us.
You better pay attention. You better pay attention.
We're the biggest growing segment of the market. But I do think what's important is seeing someone in your field see more of that. Like, I do, like, how do you think that it's going to grow in regards to this field? Because we're seeing more and more male dominated fields. The tides are shifting. How do you feel your role now? What do you hope that shows? Let's say dad brings his little girl into the shop. What do you hope she takes with her when she sees you wrenching away on the bikes?
Gosh, it's like when you go walk into a business and they say, it's taken 30 years for this business to get this bad, so it's going to take 30 years for us to get out of it. And what I think is even if one girl sees me doing this, that maybe in 10 years, it'll be 2 from that girl. And then 10 years from there, 3. And then maybe, it might take a long time, because unfortunately, the billions of people out there is still so much happening that it's not welcomed. It's not accepted. And we're super lucky to be here in Vancouver and BC, even just in Canada, where it's this ever-changing flood of, oh my goodness, there's females doing motorcycle mechanic stuff, or car mechanics, or electricians, or plumbers. It's like, we are booming, and I hope that it just spreads like a fever. I think it is going to take quite some time, and hopefully the people that do jump into it are still as open and willing and welcoming as myself, and they don't shut each other down, because that's also going to be hard.
What do you do in those moments, Richelle, like for yourself, when you have those moments of when there's just like a blatant disrespect or disregard, dismissal from those 3 moments, or even moments where you were like, do I belong here? If they've come about, what is the kind of thing that you tap into for yourself to override any self-doubts or feelings of less than, or questioning of self? What's something that you where do you go from there in your mind?
I guess the best way to answer that is that, because I've been in so many male dominated positions, like one of my very first jobs was a heavy machine operator at a concrete plant, and where they used to put porn in my forklift and rats in my locker.
Wow.
And Oh, it was trippy. I come from that. And so now I prepare the males around me. I come in, I'm humble, I'm welcoming, I'm ready to learn, and I don't disrespect anybody. And I make sure that they understand that whatever I do is with integrity. And so before I walk into a situation, you know, I say to them, if this happens, do me a favor if you care about me at all, and don't let that person approach you. Tell them that I'm the one that handles that question and that they need to come to me if that's my job. And if they notice that that situation's happening, to maybe address it themselves. You know, like I saw that you started a conversation with Richelle. I think you should finish it before chatting with me, because she's just as knowledgeable as myself. And if there's anything she's unable to answer, then she can come to us and then we can all kind of group chat about it. So now these situations, I'm lucky to be surrounded by people that are just on board with me, and we all kind of tackle it as a team. And so I don't ever feel like I'm at a loss. I feel more empowered because that person just looks embarrassed, and then they come back to me and I'm like, hi, welcome back.
That's
Hopefully
beautiful.
it's a growing moment for them, but I've got to know, because I'm just so impressed. Like, obviously you're someone that deserves and demands respect. And it's sometimes not easy for us to get to that point where we do garner that when we walk into a space. And so you kind of alluded there to obviously what would have been a really vulnerable and awful time that I'm sure other women still experience shit like this when they're around. So what was it like? Like, I have to go back to those experiences when you worked in the heavy machinery and concrete. Like, what age were you, and what were you thinking in those moments? How did you cope? How did you feel?
Oh gosh, that was such a crazy time. I was the first and only forklift driver to start at this concrete plant. My godfather got me the job. It was so well paying. I can't remember. I believe I was in my early 20s, and I was super vulnerable, you know, because obviously you're constantly growing and you're constantly trying to figure out who you are. And when you're trying to figure out your sexuality, you're trying to figure out where you belong. And when you come up with a troubled past, like, you're already dealing with so much in life that your job, where all you're doing is trying to simply buy groceries, you know, you're trying to make money to get a haircut, and that's all you care about with this job. And he got me this job and I was killing it. Like, I loved that job. I started off just patching concrete. I was outside in my coveys in the pouring rain with a thing, and it was $18 an hour, and I loved it. And we would go and learn certain things. And anytime overtime came up, I was always down for it. And so finally, I got trained on a forklift because I opted for overtime and I was the only one there. And they were like, we need somebody to do this job, so let's just train you to do it and we'll go from there. And I freaking killed it. And so they moved me to the forklift. I was driving a 151, which was pretty small at the time. It was an open style cab, so it wasn't covered. And by the end of like 2 or 3 years, I was up to what was called a 360 heister. It was enclosed and I was doing huge jobs. I was killing it. I was rocking giant pipe that were being sent to Iraq that you could drive cars through. It was such a trip. And, you know, in the moments where people would be like that, where it's not every guy, you know, a lot of guys are super excited to see that. Totally. But when those moments happened and I was still new to life, you know, like your 20s, you're like so impressionable. I thought, okay, what's happening? How do I deal with this? Do I just keep it up? And the good thing is I was a freaking lesbian. So the porn they were putting in my forklift, I was like, great knockers on that, lady. Like, wow, thanks for the free mag, you know, like,
yeah.
And you know, and I wasn't afraid to come out as a lesbian either. I was like, you know what? I love women. They're great. I'm down for it. And that's fine with me. And so that would catch them off guard a lot of the time, because I'd be like, that's cool, whatever. I don't know. I wasn't trying to exploit the women in that way, but I would have to own it and be like, that woman's beautiful. I totally support that lady for whatever the hell she's doing. Rock that shit.
Let her eat crackers in bed.
Yeah, let her do her thing. Put that up in my forklift. Let's do this. And then they leave cigarette butts and I, like whatever. It was such a trip, but it's just what has trained me to get to this place where I can now take those experiences and just remind myself, like, I don't deserve this. And that's not right. Now I know. If somebody had told me then, I wish I knew then what I know now. Then
what we always do.
I would have probably just, I guess here's the other sad part is I had brought it up and management turned a blind eye, right?
Yeah.
Because the males were also maybe good at what they did or they were irreplaceable. I have no idea. So I would just have to eat it, really. And I guess I would have just had to have figured it out and like moved on. But I mean, I made such good money and a little porn, whatever, I could pay my bills. And so, but that's the struggle that we all go through. And I feel like, another part of that is thinking I didn't even have it that bad, but really that's pretty bad. But a lot of
was like, they put rats in they had it rats. So I think that's what we do though, is a lot of times we say, well, I'm still standing or it wasn't that bad, but it's harassment. Like, let's take the porn out of it. Cause there was more than porn. It was even cigarettes. It was even rats in your locker. I'm sure there was some pretty degrading things said. I think there was probably, And I think at the end of the day, yes, it doesn't take away from the fact that you're like, yeah, this shit has built me a stronger human because of it. And I've made what happened to me work for me in the long run. But you should have never had to decide whether or not that how you were treated as a human and choose between that and a job that you were just killing the game with and loving. And you essentially, when we talked about this way back when, it kind of got to where you said, like, I had to actually walk away in the end.
I did.
It got so shitty because it was like, I have to walk away with my soul intact or my spirit still intact in a lot of ways. Cause it kept coming.
Well, and the worst part is that wasn't even the worst of the jobs.
Yeah.
So there was definitely I constantly had to switch jobs. I've probably had over 30 jobs in my life because it was so bad, and I remember working at a car dealership one time and they all spoke a different language. And one of my customers said, they're planning to rape you. And I was like,
whoa.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. And I remember calling my mom and being like, Mom, I'm unsafe and I need you to come home. And I didn't tell my godfather and I didn't tell the people that I knew because I didn't know, what to do from there. And she went in and she freaking waved her finger and she caused a storm. And we walked out of there and I was like, I had no idea. And I had worked at that place for a year and it was such a wild, I'll never forget going on a joyride with one of the managers and he had all these things in his car. And I was like, this is weird. Where are we going? And he brought me to this development site and he was like, have you ever been here? And I was like, no. And he's like, okay, do you know where we are? And I was like, no. And he's like, oh, I'm just thinking about buying this area. And then it wasn't 3 days later that my customer was like, the things that they're saying, he's like, I don't want to be caught in the middle of this because these are my people. But just so there's something bad happening here. And they're talking about rape and they're talking about how they're going to do it and where. And I was like, okay. And back then I had long hair, man. I was like as feminine as it got. So, and I was killing it. I was doing great in car sales and I was I was one of the only females there. There was another female, but there was only 2 of us. So yeah. And that was friggin' 6 years later. So
thank God that person had a conscience and said something.
Yeah, I know.
But I just find it so fascinating. You literally have had so many life experiences that have clearly brought you to this beautiful place of intrinsically knowing who you are on such a deep level. And I don't even know if you realize how much of a trailblazer you are for women out there. Like that, it's a pretty incredible thing to think. I mean, we started the podcast off with that 2%. That matters so much. And that means you are part of the change. Like, I don't love at all that you have had those life experiences. I don't think anyone should have had to go through those life experiences. But that being this part of your story, investing that into what you have, that's pretty fucking awesome.
Thank you.
Like, holy hell, dude. Literally, I'm so inspired by you in such a big way. I think this is what this platform is all about. I know Lori and I, this is what started the whole motivation, is that this community I love so much because we all come from so many different walks of life. Mm-hmm. And literally when I first stepped up into that group around all these women, I have never had it where it's almost like there was none of the niceties, or as Lori would say, the lady face. It's like we all showed up with these peeled back layers and sharing. Like, I'm just so excited to share a story like yours today. Genuinely, like I feel emotional just because I'm like, it's such an incredible story. Like, yeah, you are literally going to change the lives of women in ways that you don't even realize. And that's pretty incredible. Like, I'm sorry for your struggle, but it shows the struggle has such an incredible purpose and will continue to.
I think I was like, I don't want to say blessed, but I think I was blessed with this real strong backbone so I could do that. And I really hope I do, because people, everybody deserves it, no matter what, like females, males, does it, trans, non-binary, whoever you are, like, yeah, let's hope we can make some change. That's the idea.
If you could, Richelle, if you could say one thing or something to your younger self that you wanted you to know of where you are today, what would you say to, what would you give, what advice would you give your younger self?
That you need to live.
That's, yeah. Man, what a freaking story. Honestly, I'm so just
tell you, that's why I tell her all the time. I said, I've met a lot of people. I've been a lot of places. You are one of my favorite humans on this planet. You're one of my favorite humans.
Yo, making me blush up in here.
Oh, look at you.
Now, Richelle, I think that Lori might have forewarned you, but we do a little thing on our podcast every day, and it is our
motivation. Richelle, did I tell you this? I can't even remember if I did tell you this.
Dude, I feel like it rings a bell.
So I was like, I'm sorry, dude, if I forgot. But essentially, it's like a takeaway. Like, what can someone implement in their lives today or immediately, or what's something that's worked for you that you're like, hey, this is something that you can put into your life to remind yourself or let yourself be known that you belong. You have a seat at the table, no matter whoever you are. But what is something that you could give somebody a starting point of where they can go from here?
Little tool in the toolbox.
A little tool in the toolbox. Okay. I mean, not everybody's the same, so this is a hard one, but don't let, or let's rephrase that. Let another person's being or existence come into your life to help you remind yourself of everything that is good. Don't let just one person change you, or, somebody that's negative, or you need to let so many people into your life. If you can, like, if you're capable of doing it, the impressions of even one person can change your entire perspective. It doesn't matter if it's like a bike or a dog or a rainbow or something along those lines. I think that for anybody, any one person I have ever met, there's always another human being that has changed the way that they have felt about themselves or what they have done in their life, whether it's negative or positive. And if I had just stuck in to the ground around the concrete guys or the motorcycle or the car dealership guys, I probably would have been down my whole life. But I tried to walk away from that as hard as it was, whether it's a dark corner or something. I mean, I don't have a lot of perspective on things that I haven't been involved in, but I think there is so much good in people. And I think the only tool I could say that's ever helped me is if I meet that one new person and they are what triggers me in a good way, and I just follow that, and it keeps me alive. You know, it's
to that.
It's a person. It's that, you know, and I just follow it.
So good. It's just
Beautiful, Richelle.
Raw and pure.
I also didn't tell you that we choose quotes at the end. This is
I'm ready.
Let's just off the top of your head, pick a quote that directly relates to what we've just talked about.
What the heck?
You can pull up your Google.
Or one of your choosing. Because
just pull up your Google.
A quote?
You know
quote.
what? You be a quote.
Like, what is a quote? What is a quote?
A quote is like be the change you want to see
be
in the world.
A lyric.
Like that's a quote. Could be a lyric, a limerick.
Could be a mantra.
You know, okay.
Oh, here, she's
all
on
right.
it. Slap it down, put it down, smack it around. Let's hear it.
All right.
Just the way you're sitting and everything is giving me life. Oh,
this is a tough one. There's so many.
I know. It's this
quote of the day. All right. Okay. Let's see. I mean, Otis Redding's coming to mind, you know, and he sang a good song and it was Sitting on the Dock of the Bay. I'm going to quote that.
Oh, you didn't disappoint. I'll tell you that much.
Sitting on the dock of the bay.
Thank you, because I know I'm going to have that stuck in my head endlessly, and I'm not mad about it.
You are welcome.
All right, folks. Well, if you didn't know, that's your motivation. You've just listened to the Motivation Podcast with your host, Chrissy Van, and me, Laura Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motivation Podcast and visit our website at themotivation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.